Adonai sivateti tzahaf yagit teilatecha.
Organizers of this conference. Dr. Eliezer Papo is senior lecturer at the Hebrew Literature Department at the Ben Gurion University of the Negev, and he is also the chairman of the Moshe David Gaon Center for Ladino Culture at the same university. His research centers on oral literature in general and Sephardic literatures, oral and written, rabbinic and secular, in particular. In January 2014, his book En tu shall jest, with your son, Judeo-Spanish parodies on the Passover Haggadah, received the prestigious Ben Tzvi Award. Dr. Papo is also representative of the Israeli Academia in the Council of the National Authority for Ladino Culture, serving also as a member of its executive board. The title of presentation of Professor Papo is Object or Subject of History, Bosnian Jewish Elite Remembering the Purim of Sarajevo. Please.
Thank you. Well, it works perfectly between our two presentations because now I will continue with Purim. So, Purim basically served not only as the first diaspora-based and diaspora-constructed holiday, but also as a model for many other local Jewish holidays. In other words, there are holidays which are typical of the entire Jewish people because they are based in the canon and in the joint Jewish literature. And then even Purim, even though it happened outside of Israel, and even though it happened in diaspora, being the fact that it affected the overwhelming majority of the Jews at the time, it became part of the common memory. This holiday, being the fact that it happened in post-biblical time, and the post-Torah times, and in diaspora, it served as a model for other Jewish holidays, which are not necessarily recognized by the entire Jewish people. So you can basically have an individual Purim, you can have a family Purim, and you can have a community Purim. So, and I will get later to it, Yugoslavia, the country in which I was born and many of the people here, had its Purim triangle, right? Just like the Bermuda Triangle, because we had one Purim in Ragusa, in Dubrovnik, one Purim in Sarajevo, and another Purim in Belgrade. So, the very idea of Purim is there is an anti-Semitic power in the king's court, and that power works to convince the king to annihilate the Jews, basically to annihilate the Jews. And then a miracle happens, and the local Jewish community is saved, or some family is saved, or an individual person is saved, and then the person, the family, or the community establish the holiday, and they remember for many generations to come. It never becomes generally recognized, and many a time, once a community emigrates from that place, like for example Purim de Saragossa. Well, nobody in Saragossa today celebrates Purim of Saragossa, and being the fact that no other community is identified with the community of Saragossa, nobody in the world basically celebrates this holiday today. Or there is a family, I believe.
In Istanbul.
Yes, there is a family. Yeah, that's also interesting. There is a family which celebrates it as a family holiday, yes. Like, yes, remembrance to the community tradition, because they have all the tradition that they were coming from that city. Yes. So, now I will basically concentrate on the Purim of Sarajevo. So, what happened in 1819, and we received the information about the event from different sources. So, for example, in the book of Pizmonim, collected by Yosef ben Eliyahu Havillo from Sarajevo in 1901, there are two complas, or two religious songs written in Judeo-Spanish, written by Yehoshua ben Menahem Shalom, or Salom, the way it's pronounced in Bosnian Ladino, which celebrate the memory of the Rabbi Moshe Danon and the miracles that were performed by God for him. Then also we have we don't have it basically anymore. Zeki Effendi, Moshe Rafaelovich Atias, one of the last Oriental Renaissance men in Sarajevo. In other words, a man who wrote poetry in Judeo-Spanish and Hebrew and Arabic and Persian. And he was the last representative of Oriental Jew who was already educated in the West, in Bosnia. In any case, we have what seems to be Serbo-Croatian translation of the original Megillah. The original Megillah, the original scroll of Sarajevo Purim, written by Zeki Effendi, is lost to us. But Itzhak Samokovlija, a famous Bosnian Jewish Sephardic writer, in 1926 published what he calls Sarajevo Megillah, but what seems to be only a mere translation of Zeki Effendi's. Also, it's mentioned in a PhD written by late Chief Rabbi of Sarajevo, Moritz Levi, the Sephardim in Bosnian, which was written in German and later translated into Serbo-Croatian and Judeo-Spanish. But we will not concentrate on either of those, but rather on a book written in 1899, which is called Zichron Moshe, and it was published by Pension Moshe Chaim Atias, who might very well be the son of Zeki Effendi, because Zeki Effendi was Moshe Atias, and we know that he was ill at one particular moment in his time, and this might be a moment when additional name, Chaim, which means life, was added to his name according to Sephardic folklore. In other words, if a person undergoes a major illness, his name can be changed to Chaim, Yehiel, or anything of the sort, which implies good and long life. This particular piece of information is extremely important because it contains passages from the manuscript of the Rabbi Moshe Danon himself. And there we can see a totally different approach to the entire story, and this is exactly what I'm interested in presenting today. But in order to get to that special rabbinic Bosnian Sephardic angle on the local event, first we need to tell the story the way it's known by everybody. So, the story goes like this. There was a Jew called Moshe Chavio, and he converted to Islam at the beginning of 19th century. He became a Sufi, he became a dervish, and he went from the cultural and economic capital, which was Sarajevo, to political capital, which was Travnik at the moment. We all know that Ottoman Empire was an Islamic empire, which means that Jews and Christians were protected all the way they agreed to marginal agreed, under quotation marks, to marginal status. Now this was the time, 18th century, entire 18th century, and the beginning of 19th century, of the decline of the Ottoman Empire. And everybody was asking the same question, just like we ask, where was God in Auschwitz? And just like we ask, where was God in expulsion from Spain? The big question of Islamic theology, of Ottoman Islamic theology in 18th century, it was, where was God in Vienna? Why didn't Muslims conquer Vienna? And one of the answers offered by this Jewish convert to Islam was, being the fact that Islamic State is not marginalizing the Jews and the Christians enough. God said, well, if you are undermining the difference between the true religion that you possess and those two heresies, then you will lose also on the outside plan. Let me call it that way. So basically he was telling the Muslims, the converted Jew, the Jew who converted to Islam, he was telling Muslims that they are losing on international front because they are acting too nicely to Jews and Christians. Now, Ottoman Empire, as an Islamic empire, didn't divide between religion and politics. Politics is religion, religion is politics, being the fact that the Sultan is Khalifa, he is the representative of God on earth, and he is the replacement of the Prophet, and as such he's not only the head of the state, he's also the head of the church, let me put it that way. In other words, he is the head of Islamic faith. Consequently, any political statement against him is religious statement against the head of Islamic State, right? So, to make a long story short, the guy was executed by the Islamic State, by the Ottoman state. However, though, after he was executed by Dervish Mehmed Pasha, who was the Vizier of Bosnia from 1818 to 1820, the new Vizier comes to Bosnia. He was called Mehmed Rushdie Pasha, and Mehmed Rushdie Pasha was told by some of the local Sufi leaders that, oh, look at that, in Islamic State, Jews have so much power that they could make the Vizier kill a Jew who converted to Islam. In other words, some of the locals blamed the Jewish community of influencing the Vizier, and consequently, this guy was executed, even though, I mean, unjustly executed. Now, this Rushdie Pasha, we don't know how much he loved Islam or Quran or anything, but we know he loved money very much. So he looked at the situation and he said, oh, Jewish community in Travnik is so tiny. Let's move all of this into Sarajevo. So he collects he takes prisoners, Rabbi Moshe Danon and 9 other leaders of the Jewish community in Sarajevo, and he gives them a condition. Until 23rd of October 1819, which was Shabbat, they were supposed to give, the Jewish community was supposed to give 50,000 groschen to the Vizier, and if not, these leaders of the community will be executed. At that moment, there were 8 Muslim how would you call them? Mehana, it's called, or Mehana. It's called in Ladino or Serbo-Croatian or Bosnian and so on. These are basically places where you can drink alcohol. There were 8 such Islamic places, and Jews usually didn't attend them on Shabbat. And if they did, it was almost never on Shabbat Eve, but rather on Shabbat morning. And even if it was only on Shabbat morning, it was never by the rabbis, but rather by people who are not extremely religious. And then even if it was Shabbat morning and by people who are not extremely religious, it was basically, they would never take something that was hot and prepared on Shabbat, because that would be desecration of Shabbat. Rather, they would take some alcohol, and then they wouldn't pay on that very day, because it was Shabbat, they would pay later. However, though, the eve of Shabbat, this rabbi who was called Chaim Levi, he goes from one alcohol bar, from one bar to another, and he orders coffee. And everybody is puzzled. It's Erev Shabbat, right? And he's the rabbi, and he wants coffee, and coffee is made hot. And then he puts a golden piece of money on the table, and he leaves without drinking the coffee. And then this also plays, you know, the anti-Semitic concept: the Jews never give huge, how do you call it, Trinkgeld, right? Huge bakshish, but entire golden piece without drinking coffee and so on. To make a long story short, the rabbi gets back to his home, and the entire all the representatives of the Muslim Sarajevo are in front of his windows. And then he says, so the guy who said they took the communists first, but we were not communists, they took the Jews first, but the second, but we were not Jews. When they came to come, so you remember, when they came to take us, there was nobody anymore to complain. So the first guy to proclaim similar sentence seems to be this rabbi from Sarajevo, who said the Muslim community, well, today it's our rabbis, tomorrow it's your leaders. Today it's our money, tomorrow it's your money. But this Vizier will never leave Bosnia without taking the last penny in the country. And this is as much as I can do, and now it's up to you. And if they are guilty, let them be killed. And if they are not, let them be freed. But what kind of guilt is that? Which can be settled with 50,000 groschen. And then tomorrow morning, the charshi was closed. Nobody opened their stores. And the representatives of the Muslim community went to Vizier, but they went in such a way that Vizier got afraid. So he dressed as a woman, and he escaped to Travnik, and from Travnik to Istanbul. And then this is one of the places where the Jewish community enters back to the stage to help now the Muslim community, because the Muslims are now writing to the king, to Sultan, to make a dementi of what the Vizier will write, because he will not say, I was acting unjustly. He will say, this is insurrection against the Sultan. And sultans don't need necessarily to check. So basically, through the influences of the Jewish community, of the local Jewish community in Istanbul, the community of Sarajevo was able to make it possible for the demanti of Sarajevo Muslims to reach the Sultan before the letter written by the Vizier. This is how we know it from all other sources. And now I'm getting to this rabbinical source, because what's interesting on page, well, actually, you don't need to know the page, but the author of this book himself says that he knows the Megillah of Zeki Effendi, but he says that Zeki Effendi used mostly Turkish sources, unlike this guy who uses the notes of the rabbi himself. So, he says, por este paso compuso el famoso y reconocido por letrator de nuestra lengua, señor Moshe Rafael Atías, Hashem Ishmereu V'Yechayeu, un libro muy hermoso, contado en larguía, la más parte topó en la biblioteca de los muhammedanos. In other words, and concerning this event, a very famous and known literate of our language, Mr. Moshe Rafael Atías, wrote a beautiful book telling the event at large, but most of the events he found in the library of the Muhammadans. On the other side, this author bases himself on the notes by the rabbi himself. And look at this. This is very interesting. These are the notes of the rabbi, and this is the way the rabbi sees the event. And he says like this: En mi hacer subir sobre mi corazón lo que trushó el Rav Kava Yashar de nombrado Haramban, que todas cosas que van a capitar se topan designadas en la perashá de Haazinu. I will translate straight to English. He says like this, and I remembered what the author of the book called Kav Hayashar said, that Nachmanides, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, claimed that the entire future history of the world is contained in the 28th chapter of the 5th book of Moses, in Perashat Haazinu, if you just know how to read properly. Now look at this. And he says, Pensé en mi corazón topar soltura para la revuelta que estamos en ella hallados. And then I thought in my heart how to find a solution for the torment in which we are at the present. Which means this was written during the event. So, he found that particular Torah reading, Haazinu, starts with Hebrew words, Ya'arof kematar likhi. And then he took the word Ya'arof as an abbreviation of, as an acrostichon of Hebrew words, Ya'amod alenu Rushdie Pasha. Rushdie Pasha will turn against us. And then basically, the half of the Hebrew verse became an entire Hebrew sentence, which means which means Katav Malchut Tipesh Rav Lecha Kedoshim Hibata Yadecha Ta'aseh Zot Lecha Ketavcha Tamenu Lecha, and so on. So basically, Rushdie Pasha will stand against us, but the scripture tells to him, "Oh, you stupid, this will be your own end." I'm just translating this in a very vague manner. So this is something very important to start with. And then there is another piece of information coming from another rabbinic source, which says that as soon as the Jews were taken prisoners, Rabbi Moshe Danon told everybody, don't worry, no tengas ningún miedo, don't have any kind of fear, nosotros vamos ser salvos, we will be saved. Y en este año, cada uno de los que estamos aquí apresados, and during this year, each and every of us who are here prisoners, con Ben Zachar vamos ser aijados. We will all have a male child born to us during this year. Okay, so what we see is Muslim community saving and helping the Jews. But we also see that Sarajevo community is not small and tiny community, and it doesn't feel comfortable with being object of history. Consequently, the rabbi himself remembers the thing in such a way that Muslims who helped them become the object of history, and Jews are the subject, because the entire thing has to do with Jewish relationship with God. First of all, it was all pre-told and preconceived and already prophetized in the Torah given to Moses on Sinai. The Torah given to Moses on Sinai already contained the information that Rushdie Pasha will go against the Jews of Sarajevo, and that he will take them prisoners, and that he will be destroyed by God. And then I also want to read you another piece by the same rabbi, and he says like this: y después ansí apañó el vezir varones de pelea por venir y pelear con turcos de la ciudad y destruir y matar y prear, y el santo bendito Elmo escapó de su mano. And then the vezir came, whatever, he took the Jews to prison. But what is important for me is the following. He says like this: en día de 17 de Tevet, año prisión, arrivó a nos la besora que el maldicho fue rebajado de su empiego, y en el día de 14 de Shabbat arrivó a Travnik Sidki Zaim Pasha, enviado del rey, y fue tomada de él su grandeza. También las barbas, que señales de honor, fueron tomadas de él. Se topa de el día que apresóamos, que fue el día de segundo de Marcheshvan, 74 días. In translation, on the 17th of Tevet of that year, which corresponds to the 4th of January 1820, we received the information that Vezir was taken down from his position. And then on 14th of Shevat, which is 30th of January, Sidki Zaim Pasha, the emissary of the king, came to Travnik, and Vezir was taken away his beard, which meant, which was act of disrespect. And then the rabbi says, it seems that from the second day of Marcheshvan, when we were taken prisoners, until the day his honors were taken from him, there were exactly 74 days. And there is a biblical verse which says, Bitchu badonai ade ad. You should have confidence in God until always. Now, always in Hebrew is 74 when you translate it. So you should have confidence in God until the end of the day 74. So, now to make a long story short, because I need to start ending, right? To make the long story short, we see that the Jews of Sarajevo were too well established a community in order to think of themselves only as objects of somebody's mercy. So the Jewish way, and especially the way constructed by the rabbinic elite, subjugates the entire event to Torah and to God. God knew this from before. It's already written in Torah. The rabbi, being so close to God, he knew where to find it in the Torah. The rabbi also knew from the very beginning that there will be a happy ending. So the rabbi was not a victim, and the Jewish community was not a victim. They became objects of they became subjects of history because of their closeness to God. While the Muslim community, to which they are thankful still, were objects of history because everything was predestined. So the Vizier was meant to persecute the Jews, and the Muslim community was meant to help the Jews. So we can see And later, Stefan here will speak about the Purim of Belgrade. And I would just like to underline a small difference. You will see basically how Jews of Belgrade were saved, he will tell you. And then the Jews in Dubrovnik were saved. The Inquisition took a Jew as a prisoner under the claim that he asked from a Christian lady to kill Christian child for Pesach. And then he was tortured, but he never ever accepted the guilt. And when he was freed by the Inquisition, the Jews of Dubrovnik started celebrating their own Purim of Ragusa. So basically, being the fact that Yugoslavia was such a huge and diverse country, we can see three different, totally different experiences. In Dubrovnik, Jews in Catholic world, right? So the accusation the Jews use blood for matzot. In Serbia, Jews are between Turks and Serbs who are fighting, so they are collateral damage. And in Bosnia, Jews are helped by a local Muslim community, but the community is too big for them in order to accept the Muslim version of the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Papa, for this very interesting lecture. So now we have 5 to 10 minutes for questions or comments. Please.
It's very interesting how they changed the history and the very complex relationships between literature and history, what you are touching here, between legend and history. And now, as a writer, not as a researcher, actually you published a novel based on this historical event. So I ask you, how did you see as a writer this event? What was your inclination?
Well, by then I didn't know about the existence of this particular source.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And I didn't know it will come to life in another story which I collected from Sarajevo, which is basically based on what Rabbi wrote, but in a very, obviously it was told by a person who doesn't know Hebrew, so he cannot quote, but just the way the oral story usually does, he made it, he says like this. And then, when the Muslims came to liberate the rabbi took the watch and he said, "Oh, you guys, you are always late." And then they asked him, "What do you mean by this?" And he told them, "Well, there is a verse which says God will help you." That's what he said. There is a word which says God will help you. And when you translate that verse to letters, you get this year, this month, this day, this hour. And you are late. Now, the spirit is the same. The spirit is the same. Rabbi is above historical events, and he knows what will happen, and he's so cool. He's just waiting for the objects of history to liberate him. But the guy couldn't quote the source. He didn't know the source. He just told the story. So basically, the story proceeded to live without reference to Hebrew, Ain, Dalet, and Ad, and all of that. Mm-hmm. But when I was writing my La Megillah de Sarai, I didn't know neither about the story nor about the rabbinical source.
Now you have to write another novel.
Ah, yes, I do.
Thank you.
I would like to remind all of us on the same case in contemporary Serbian history of literature. In the Nilokish encyclopedia of that, you have post-scriptum, and the relation between documents and fiction is the very same as the relation between your fiction and the, let's say, prospect in Purim of Sarajevo.
Well, thank you. I will have that in mind when I write the second novel.
Yes?
Is there any reception of this thing, this legend or historical story in folklore of Muslims and Serbs and other ethnics in Bosnia?
Well, the Jews actually didn't start to celebrate the holiday immediately in a very constructed way. It took between the event until the time that Zeki Effendi wrote for the first time the scroll, it took few decades. And the thing that happened was like this. As I said, he was the Renaissance man. Oriental Renaissance man, and he was also already educated in the West. And then he needed to undergo an operation in Vienna. So his sons took him to Vienna. And then the professors in Vienna said, you need to be operated tomorrow morning first thing. He went to his hotel, and in the dream, Rabbi Moshe Danon appeared to him, and he told him, just go home, everything is taken care of. So he told to his sons, who are totally Westerners, he's half-half. So he told to his sons, it's all, I don't need any operation, I should just go home. And they told him, come on, you are an educated man. You know, doctors are saying, he said, no, Rabbi Moshe Danon promised me I am going home. And he went home. And then, as an act of thanking to the rabbi, he wrote the story. And he started in his own home reading the Megillah. And then, when he died, it was taken from his home to the synagogue. However, though, only Jews celebrated it. And sometimes, I mean, after the Holocaust, nothing of it stayed. I was unable to deduce until each year there was still a custom of reading the Megillah in one of the Sarajevo synagogues. But Muslims and Serbs do not remember that at all. Today, it's a political matter, right? Because the country is disunited. So consequently, and with everything that's going on between Muslims and Jews in Israel, the local Muslim community is reinventing and retelling this story as an how would I call it? As a display of good relations of Jews and Muslims in Bosnia. But it's new. It's new and it's political, and it's not something that lived and was told and was marked by folklore or anything else.
And in history of the Ottoman rule in Sarajevo and changing pashas, was there any notice about the role of the Jews in that place?
There is, well,
in the official history.
In the official history about this event?
Yes.
Well, there is a collective Arzuhal written by 249 military and legal and religious authority of Muslim Sarajevo, which wrote to Sultan a letter against Rushdie Pasha, not mentioning the Jews and mentioning the Christians, which is extremely interesting. And so it seems to be that at that particular moment they wanted to make the claim as general as possible. He's wrong as ruler. And they didn't want to play the Jewish card. So they say he's doing this and he's doing that, and he's also mistreating the Christians. And Jews are not mentioned at all. But we all know from the context that this is the letter that they wrote after there was an insurrection against him because of the Jewish thing. So it's very interesting that they don't mention the Jews.
Who knows the reason?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Our